This video is going to be explaining this most recent quiz on 10.1, 10.2. Let's jump right in. Question 1, it's a multiplication of two fractions. And of course we know that we need to factor first and then cancel. So I'm going to look at that first fraction. And the x squared and the 4x, you can pull out a GCF. That GCF you pull out will be an x. What's left over on the inside will be a x minus 4. And then on the denominator, we have a quadratic trinomial where your a value is 1. That's where you have to think what times what is your c value, negative 12, that if you combine together is your b value, negative 1. And if it helps you, you can make a list like negative 1 times 12, negative 2 times 6, negative 3 times 4. And you think which pair of numbers combines together to give you the middle value, negative 1. Well, the negative 3 plus 4, that's a positive 1. So those are the right numbers, just the wrong signs. So change that to a plus 3 and that to a minus 4. So the denominator will factor to two sets of parentheses with the x, and we have a positive 3 and a negative 4. So this is our entire first fraction factored. I want to factor the second fraction now. The second fraction, I got x squared plus 9x plus 18. Again, it may help you to make a list of the multiples of 18 because you're thinking, what times what is c? That if you combine together is b. So 1 times 18, 2 times 9, 3 times 6, and that's about it. So which pair of numbers combines together to give you the middle value, positive 9? As you can see, 3 plus 6 gives you 9. You don't even have to change any signs, right? 3 plus 6 is that middle value, 9. So let's go to the second fraction. It is a multiplication sign in between them. The second fraction will factor to x, and of course that pair of numbers works perfectly, the plus 3 and the plus 6. And last but not least, x squared plus 3x minus 18. Again, that's a quadratic trinomial with the a value of 1. We could set this up once again. And this time we got to think what times what is negative 18, that if I combine together is positive 3. So it's actually the same set of numbers, but we have a negative in front. And if we think about combining, this gives us 17. That's not a 17, that's a 3. This gives us 7. That's not a 7, that's a 3. This right here gives us 3. And we don't even have to change the sign. It's a negative 3 and positive 6. So we're good to go. Negative 3, positive 6. And now that we have factored everything, we have pure multiplication, which means we could cancel out anything that's identical up on top and bottom. So we could cancel the above binomial x minus 4 with this one x minus 4. Then we could cancel this x plus 3 up here with that x plus 3 down there. And then we could cancel the x plus 6 up here with the x plus 6 down there. And what do we have left? A simple x up on top over x minus 3 on the bottom. Looking at our multiple choice answers, x over x minus 3, it looks like this guy is the answer. All the other ones are incorrect. Okay, let's move on to the next question. All right, we're on the next question here. Whoops, I have an extra box. Let's move that out of the way. So we need to factor and cancel. That's the way to simplify any fraction. Factor it, then cancel. So this bottom one is kind of challenging because you can't pull out a GCF. The a value is 2, so we're going to have to use that multi-step process of factoring. This top one is a little weird as well because we're used to having the x squared first and the 64 second. And actually, I'm going to switch these to make them look the way I want to. But of course, the negative sign in front of the x squared belongs to the x squared. So when I rewrite this, I'm going to rewrite it as a negative x squared with a positive 64. Okay. Now I do want to factor this numerator, but the problem is I have a negative in front of my x squared. I really want it to just be a regular x squared with no number in the front. So what I could do to make that a positive x squared, I could pull out a negative 1, and then on the inside I will have a positive x squared minus 64. Okay, so far I'm just working on the numerator. Okay, so I switched them, I have a negative x squared plus 64. I factored out a negative 1 to make that look like a positive x squared. And now on the inside of this parenthesis, I do have a difference of two squares, of two perfect square terms. Or you could even think what times what is negative 64, that if you combine together gives you the middle value, which is nothing. That would be a positive 8 and a negative 8. So what I'm trying to get at here is that red perfect square binomial, the difference of two squares, that factors to x plus 8, x minus 8. And let's not forget about the negative 1 that's out in the front that you need to multiply by. Anyways, that is the numerator completely factored. I hope you guys understand that. And it's going to be over the factored form of the denominator. Okay, so ultimately I want to be able to get here, but the problem is that the a value is 2. Now we could start guessing and checking, but I'm going to go through the actual process. Step 1 would be to multiply a times c. That would be 2 times negative 8. That'll give me a negative 16. Okay, then step 2 is to make a list of the multiples of this guy. All right, of whatever you got on step 1, make a list of the multiples. That's negative 1 times 16, negative 2 times 8, negative 3 doesn't work, negative 4 times 4, and that's it. And then I think, which of those pairs of numbers combines together to give me the middle value, negative 15? And if you add negative 1 and 16, that'll give me a positive 15, but I want it to be a negative 15. So I have the right numbers, just the wrong signs. So change that to a positive 1 and a negative 16. And those are the pair of numbers that I want for step 2. So again, let me just rewrite it over here on the side. The pair of numbers for step 2 is positive 1 and negative 16. This is what I really want. Anyway, step 3 is where we do the setup. We're going to make it look like our answer already. And how do we do the setup? It's parenthesis, 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 ax, and then you put the numbers from step 2 right there. That's a setup. So let me actually do that now. Parenthesis, 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 parenthesis. What is ax according to this quadratic trinomial? 2x, right? 2x. So let's write down 2x on both of them. 2x, 2x. And then the pair of numbers from step 2 comes down right here. So I'm going to have a plus 1 and a minus 16. Plus 1 minus 16. And then after that, we go for the fourth magical step where you do that magic divide. Okay, so what could I divide this guy by? Nothing, right? 2 and 1 have nothing in common. You could technically divide by 1 and you're going to get the same exact thing, 2x plus 1. Now this other one I could divide both by what? 2. By 2, and 2 divided by 2 is 1x, so I'm going to have a single x, and then 16 divided by 2 is 8, so I have a minus 8. So ladies and gentlemen, we have factored that denominator. Now we're able to cancel whatever is identical up on top and on bottom. As you can see, there's an x minus 8 and an x minus 8 that cancel out. So this leaves us with our final answer, negative 1 times x plus 8 in parentheses over 2x plus 1. Now, when I look at my multiple choice answers, none of them have parentheses. That's because they might have put the negative out here in the front. So this negative 1, they could have moved this out here and put the negative right in front of the fraction, and it appears that's what they did because that looks like the answer, right? If you pull that negative out to the front, then you're going to have a simple x plus 8 up on top over the 2x plus 1 on the bottom, and that is what we have right here. So that's the correct answer for this question. As you can see, there it is. That's the correct answer. Alrighty, I hope that helps with this one. Let's move on to another. So, again, we have multiplication of two fractions. You want to factor everything possible, and then you want to cancel, okay? So, on the first fraction, there's nothing to factor up here, so that's going to stay exactly the way it is, x minus 5. Down here, I have a 10 and a 2. They're both even numbers. I could at least pull out the GCF of 2. So let me pull out a 2. So when we pull out that 2 from the 10, that becomes a 5x. And when we pull out the 2 from the 2, that becomes a 1. So 5x plus 1 is what's left over on the inside of that first denominator. Now let's go to the second fraction. Let's factor what we have up here, and we need to recognize that this is a difference of two perfect square terms. Difference of two perfect square terms. And in other words, we could use square roots to be able to get it in our factored form answer format. Okay, so if I do the square root of 25x squared, that'll be a 5x. And if I do the square root of 1, the square root of 1 is 1. Put a 1 right there on both of them. And of course, the signs have to be opposite. Think about it. If you say 1 times negative 1, that's the only way you're going to get a negative 1. They have to be opposite signs. If they were both positive, then you'd have a positive 1. That wouldn't work. Not only that, when you distribute and combine like terms in the middle term has to cancel out. And the only way that'll happen is if one's positive and one's negative. Anyways, let's move on to the denominator. The denominator is a quadratic trinomial. The c value is 12, the b value is negative 10. We got to think what times what is 25. That combines together to give us the middle value, negative 10. So obviously it's the 5 and the 5, but that'll give us a positive 10, and we want a negative 10. So we have the right numbers, just the wrong signs. So change those to negatives. And now we will be able to plug it into our factored form answer format, having a minus 5 and a minus 5. Okay, so now that we have factored everything, now that we have multiplication, we need to cancel things out. As we could see, we have an x minus 5 up here and an x minus 5 down there. That canceled out. We also have 5x plus 1 up here and a 5x plus 1 down here. That cancels out. So our final answer is this, because nothing else cancels out. We have a 5x minus 1 up on top. We have a 2 on the bottom and an x minus 5 on the bottom. So when we look at, that is not the answer because it's a plus 1. It's none of these, right? Oh yeah, but there are more options over here which are not it. And yeah, we are right. The answer is none of these. Okay, so be careful. There will be some questions that have none of these as an actual answer. More so on the practice quiz, I think. Anyways, let's move on to the next question. So on this one, we are dividing fractions. So we're going to change the division to multiplication. This is going to become multiplication, but we're going to have to flip the second fraction. Okay. And of course, even before doing any of this, we want to factor anything possible. So this requires that trick of switching and then factoring out a negative 1. So I'm going to rewrite my negative x squared term first and my positive 4 second. Okay, so I have a negative x squared with a positive 4. Okay, and then from there, I am going to factor out a negative 1, and I will have a positive x squared minus 4. Okay. And then if you look at the inside right there, that x squared minus 4, that could be broken down to x plus 2x minus 2, if you factor that. So up on my numerator, I have the negative 1, that red negative 1 that I factored out. And then the x squared minus 4, that breaks down to x plus 2, x minus 2. I know I didn't really explain that. You could do the difference of two squares, or you could think what times what is negative 4, that if you add together is a middle value, which will be nothing. That'll be a positive 2 and a negative 2. I hope we understand factoring that. So anyways, that's barely this first numerator of this first fraction. Let's factor this bottom denominator of the first fraction. That's a quadratic trinomial where your a value is 1. So you could think this, put an x and an x. And we got to think what times what is the c value that if you combine together is the b value. It may help you to make a list, 1 times 6 or 2 times 3. Obviously, 2 and 3, when you add those, it gives you a 5. You want it to be a negative 5, not a positive 5. So you have the right numbers, just the wrong signs. Change it. You're going to have a negative 2 in here and a negative 3 right there. Now, looking at the second fraction, we're going to flip it, and as I flip this fraction, I'm going to factor it. So this 3x plus 6, I'm going to factor it and write it at the bottom. What could I pull out of the 3x plus 6? A 3. So I'm going to pull out the 3 on the bottom. what do I have left? I'm going to have an x plus 2, and it's going to be on the bottom. Of course, it was on top, but as I moved it down, I factored out a 3. And this guy, I want to factor out a what?
4.
4, that's right. And that's going to be now up on top. When I pull out that 4, I will now have an x minus 3 left over, and it's up on top. X minus 3 in parentheses. So now that we've factored everything, and now that we have multiplication, we could cancel anything that's identical, both on top and bottom. So looking at the first fraction, you have an x minus 2 up there, x minus 2 down there, that cancels out. We also have x minus 3 up on top, and an x minus 3 down here, that cancels out. And we also have an x plus 2 up here, and an x plus 2 down there, that cancels out. So our answer actually is, yeah, whatever's left over, we got to multiply. So this is negative 1 times 4. That's going to be a negative 4 over 3, because 3 is the only thing left on the bottom right there. So negative 4/3. And if you look for that multiple choice answer, there are none that have a negative 4/3. Wow, that one's tricky. That's a positive 4/3. But yeah, be careful. It's negative 4/3. So none of these is the correct answer. Okay. None of these. Number 5, it's a complex rational expression. It looks complicated because you have fractions within fractions. You have a fraction for the numerator, fraction for the denominator. It looks complicated, but it'll look less complicated if you make that division bar a division sign and write this whole thing out horizontally instead of vertically. So I really have the 8 over 5x division bar, but I'm going to put a division sign, divided by 4/5. Okay, you actually are going to love this problem if it pops out on the actual quiz. Because the division, all you got to do is change to multiplication by flipping the second fraction only. So you'll get a 5/4 instead of a 4/5. That first fraction stays as is. You don't flip anything.
We can make 4 1 and 8 2.
That's exactly right. The 4 and the 8 cancel out. You're going to have a 1 left over and a 2 left over.
So it's 10.
And what about those 5s? You could also cancel out this 5 with this 5, and there are no more 5s, right? So what is our final answer going to be? What's left up on top? 2
2 1 or x.
over x. 2 over x. And let's look for that answer on the multiple choice. There it is, 2 over x. Okie doke. Once again, we have a complex fraction. All we got to do is write it horizontally to make it look nicer. And we might as well factor anything possible. So as I look at this first numerator of the first fraction, first of all, let me do this. I always draw this big division bar. I draw it in blue, and then I replace it with the division sign. And
So basically do the same thing.
yeah, basically do the same thing. The only difference is that on the first fraction up here, we might as well start factoring. X squared minus 64. What does that factor to? You could do square roots, or you could, or you could think what times what is negative 64, that if you add together is a b value, the middle term, which there is no middle term. So that would have to be a minus 8 and a plus 8, right? Minus 8 plus 8. So we have factored this first one. It is over 8x, so let me keep it over 8x. There's nothing to factor there. And then the second fraction down here that we're dividing by, I might as well switch the 8 and the negative x, okay? So I'm going to switch the 8 and the negative x. So up on top, I'm going to have a negative x with a positive 8 instead of the 8 and the negative x. I have a negative x and a positive 8. All I did was switch them, okay? Over 24. Over 24. Why did I do it blue? I don't know. There you go. Okay, so now we need to change the division to multiplication. This division is going to become a multiplication by flipping the second fraction. So that second fraction, I'll have a 24 up on top, and I'll have a negative x plus 8 on the bottom. The first fraction is going to stay the same. We have the x minus 8 and the x plus 8 over 8x. So now that I have multiplication, is there anything that I could cancel out?
8 can be 1.
8 and 24, right? That'll become a 1. This will become a 3 because 8 times 3 is 24. Is there anything else that I could cancel? I mean, if you look at this guy, the negative x plus 8, and you see x's and 8's up here,
Change the sign.
we got to change the sign by factoring out a negative 1. Man, there's a lot of factoring out a negative 1. I guess it's a very important skill. Negative 1, pull out the negative 1. What are you going to have left on the inside? X minus 8, right? So we've changed the way it looks, but now we have,
Now we can cancel out the 2 and x minus 8.
yeah, we have an x minus 8 up there, x minus 8 down there. Let's cancel those guys out. So that cancels with that. And what's left? Up on top, we have a we have an x plus 8 with a 3.
X plus 8.
Over X.
3 x plus 8 over
Negative 1.
-1 with an x.
Negative 1x.
-1x, okay? Negative 1x. Now,
So just negative x.
I would actually write this answer, I wouldn't leave this negative in the denominator. I would take this negative and put it out here.
Sorry.
Yeah, so let's do that. I'm gonna put the negative out here in the front, and I am going to erase the negative on the bottom. This is the best answer right there. You know, another little detail would be that the 1 is unnecessary in the denominator, right? So that would be probably what you're going to see as the answer. Negative fraction 3x, or 3 times x plus 8 over x. Of course, that could even be written as a negative 3 multiplied by x. That'd be a negative 3x minus 24 over x. But I'll leave it like this in factored form with the negative out in the front. So right here, we're finally to adding and subtracting fractions. And of course, you need to factor everything possible first to be able to find your LCD. So if we look at the first denominator and we factor that, you got to think what times what is your C value, that if you combine together is your B value. That will be a negative 3 times a positive 2, right? Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. If you add it together, it does give you the middle value, negative 1. Okay, and then we're going to factor the second denominator by pulling out the GCF of 2, and I will have an x minus 3 left over. Okay, so for the LCD, we want an LCD. For the LCD, we're going to write down whatever repeats one time. So the x minus 3 and the x minus 3, that matches up in both denominators. So I write that one time, x minus 3, and then I bring down everything else in addition to that. So I also have the binomial x plus 2, and I also have the number 2. So ladies and gentlemen, this is the first essential part of our problem, that identifying that our LCD is x minus 3 times x plus 2 times 2. And to be honest, I would write it with the 2 first and then the x plus 2, then the 3. It just looks nicer written in order. So anyways, I want to change the first fraction. I want to rewrite it having this LCD 2 x plus 2 x minus 3. And how do I do that? Well, the first fraction has an x minus 3 and has the x plus 2, has the x minus 3, x plus 2, but obviously it's missing the 2. So I need to multiply by 2, both top and bottom, to be able to change it to my LCD. So I'll multiply by 2 up here, by 2 down there, and I will have a new numerator of 2. Now let's do the same for the second fraction. That second fraction, I want this 2 times x minus 3 to become 2 times x minus 3 times x plus 2. So let me write this out. 2x plus 2, x minus 3. So in order to change this one to the LCD, obviously it's missing what?
X plus 2.
The x plus 2. So we're going to multiply both top and bottom by x plus 2.
14.
Yep. And we're going to have to distribute. 7 times x is 7x. 7 times 2 is 14. And now that we have that common denominator, our answer is simply adding the numerators over that LCD, 2, x plus 2, x minus 3. So when we combine the numerators, we have 2 plus 14. That's going to be a 16, positive 16. And the 7x comes down. So there's our final answer. I also want to remind you, if you have a minus sign, you're going to have to distribute that minus sign. That would become a minus 7x. That would become a minus 14. And then you combine like terms. But because it's plus, you don't have to distribute a plus. It doesn't change anything. That is our final answer. Let's look for that on our multiple choice answers. And there it is. That second one. That's the correct one. All right, let's move on. So this question is a little different than the rest because you're going to actually select the LCD of the problem. So I'm not even asking you to solve it, all right? I'm just saying, what is the LCD? So how do we find the LCD? You got to first factor. So this first quadratic trinomial, what does it factor to? What times what is a C value, negative 12, that if you combine together is a B value, positive 4. It may help you to make a list. Negative 1 times 12, negative 2 times 6, negative 3 times 4. So which pair of numbers combines together to give you that middle value, positive 4?
Negative 2 times 6.
Negative, yep, 6 times negative 2, the negative 2 and the 6. And you don't have to change. You don't have to change any signs because if you add them, negative 2 plus 6, that is positive 4. So it's good. It's good to go, right? So it's a negative 2 and a positive 6. All right. So that first denominator is factored. Let's factor the second denominator. Second denominator, x. What times what is negative 6 that if I combine together is positive 5? It's either negative 1 times 6 or negative 2 times 3. Which one? Negative 2 and 3. If I add that together, it gives me a 1.
Negative 1 times 6.
Negative 1 times 6. If I add those together, it really does give me a positive 5, the B value, positive 5. So I don't have to change any signs either. That's a negative 1. That's a positive 6. And those are my denominators already factored. Now, to get the LCD, we write whatever matches up in both.
X plus 6.
The x plus 6. This guy and this guy, they match up in both. So that's the first part. Whoops. That's the first part of my answer, x plus 6.
And then x minus 2.
And then you bring down the rest, right? The x minus 2,
And then x minus 1.
and then the x minus 1.
And that's it.
And that's it. Let's take a look at our answers over here.
None.
None of these. Fantastic. Anyway, yeah. So
Does it matter which order you put them in?
it doesn't matter which order you put them in. Now, I normally like writing them in numerical order. I'd probably put the x minus 1 first, x minus 2, and then the x plus 6, but it does not matter at all. But that's our LCD. So you're not even asked to solve the entire problem. It's just asking you for the LCD. And once again, how do you find the LCD? You factor first. You take what repeats, what matches up, write it once, and then bring down the rest. And that's it. So I'm going to end this long video right here, and I'm going to do a second part 2 video for the quiz in a bit.